I didn't, I didn't get connected. Bob, how are you?
Mr. Peterson. Peters, that's it.
Jesus has been.
Yeah. That's where I remember you from.
Known to a lot of people as Teresa's husband.
Oh, yeah. I dated a Olympic gold medal. No, she was a silver medalist in the 70 Olympics. And I was always the boyfriend of the,
I mean, not always a bad thing.
yeah, it got old after a while. Susie was her name.
Well,
Hello again. Good, thanks.
Nice to meet you.
We could certainly impress people in a
know.
nightclub, couldn't we?
Very bright.
Yeah, we'd be.
today.
Yeah.
If you don't remember.
Oops, sorry,
Sorry.
No. Good to see you. Good to see you too. Hey, Tim.
Hi, Darcy.
Do we have some people that are, let you know they're calling in, or we just don't know yet? He's traveling. Okay. Okay, great. Have you had a chance to do an onboarding with Josh yet?
Not for that. I work with Josh on some programs we're doing, but
Mhm.
not for this, no.
Okay, great. So we're gonna try to do something kind of formal, and I had suggested to him that maybe we just do it as part of the meeting since about half the board is new, or if that doesn't work for people, then maybe like do a kind of one group meeting so we don't have to have like 5 separate.
Yeah.
meetings to Teach everybody. Or but in the meantime, you guys can always call me or Josh if you have any questions going through the packet or anything.
You as well.
Parks Board.
My
Member.
district.
Oh, you are?
You know, I 175 emails, and it's mostly about you getting emails? You're not.
Nope. I mean, I
Yes.
got a few.
At least when they call me stupid, I wish they would at least about spell it right.
I kind of partial to the double O. Little emphasis there.
Hello.
Hi, how are you? Good. Ooh. Yep. I put my phone in my bag, so I'm gonna have to use this clock, which think is running slow, but no, I could get it out, but then, I try not to do that during a meeting.
5:29.
Thank you.
Guess I should ask, is it okay that I'm looking at the agenda and stuff on my phone? Or
Yeah.
I just couldn't get it printed.
Oh,
today.
I should clarify, as the chair, if I have my phone out here, it'll be ringing and texting and
Oh,
I'll get
gotcha.
distracted. So
All right. Usually I would print, but yes. Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, because sometimes they're kind of thick.
Yeah, I'm just out of copy paper now in my house noticed.
That's all right. She had to print one for a meeting because my printer wasn't talking to my laptop suddenly.
They always are doing something like.
All right, so it is 5:30. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency Board, March 21st, 2023 to order. Hopefully we'll have a few more people joining us. Paula, would you please do the roll?
Stacy Coburn.
Present.
Scott Hagee is absent. Darcy Long.
Present.
McLaughlin.
I'm present.
David Peters.
Doesn't,
John Richardson is absent. Shannon Saldivar. Absent. Ellen Wood.
Present.
I see that Scott Hagee is waiting to be let in.
Wood.
Yep.
It's, yeah, yeah, but it's not Woods anymore. I don't know if we need to correct that.
All right, so we'll wait just 30 more seconds and we'll stand up and do the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, if you'd stand with me. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So at this point, I'd like to have an approval of the agenda. I'll move the approval of the agenda as presented. Thank you, Member Coburn. Do I have a second?
Laughlin will second.
Thank you, Board Member McLaughlin. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, Scott.
Oh,
All right, so the first thing on our agenda is election of officers. But before that we do that, I just want to quickly go around and have people introduce themselves and say what entity they're from, because not everybody knows everybody else. So Councilor McLaughlin, if you wouldn't mind.
Dallas City Council, position number 1.
I'm with Northwest Parks and Rec.
Name for
Oh, Ellen, it's Ellen Potter. I think it says Woods on my thing, but it is Potter. That's my maiden name.
Dan Richardson, Dallas City Council.
Dave Peters with McClumbia Fire and Rescue. Board member.
Right, Darcy Long, the Dallas City Council.
Stacy Coburn, Port of the Dalles.
And Scott's in the airport, so, oh, there you go.
I'm Scott Hagee. I'm a commissioner with Wasco County. Sorry,
Thank you.
I couldn't be there.
Nope, thanks, Scott. Okay, so usually in January of every year, we elect officers. We need a chair and a co-chair. I have been the chair for the last year. I'm willing to continue, but also if someone else is interested, you can nominate yourself. And then say we need a co-chair because our co-chair has stepped down. It was Kathy Schwartz, former county commissioner.
I nominate Darcy Long as the chairperson.
I'll second that.
Any other nominations? Okay, all in favor of myself, Darcy Long, as the chair, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, great, thank you. Now we need a nomination, self-nomination or otherwise for co-chair. Okay, yes,
Not me.
Who was that?
So it's not gonna
Van?
be, no, not gonna be me. So it's gonna be someone
Scott,
else.
it looks like.
That was
I'm
it?
sorry.
oh, we need a, hold on, we need a microphone here.
Scott nominated himself? No, I mean, I'm too new at this.
We have a nomination for co-chair.
The, yeah, well, No,
Push the button on the end if that's the red. Push and hold. Oh,
we love technology.
Can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Thank you. I was just going to tell to Chair Long, maybe some of the board members here don't know what the duties of the vice chair are. And so it might be helpful to find a nomination is what I was going to say before it seems like we got a nomination. But as far as I can tell, for what it's worth, it seems that the duties of the vice chair include typically running the meeting in the absence of the chair.
Typically,
Yeah.
yes. And if there's ever any controversial issues or things that we need multiple people to weigh in on, sometimes chair will take the co-chair along to meet with a person. And of course, Director Chandler or whoever we have at that point. That's okay. I'm just committing you to things. Don't worry about it.
What's your interest?
Well, go for it.
What's your interest?
All right, I'll take it. Let's go.
I nominate Tim.
Second that.
Tim McLaughlin's been nominated and seconded for co-chair or vice chair. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it's passed. Great. Welcome aboard. All right, so we have the minutes from February 21st, 2023. I know some of you were not present, but the minutes are in the packet. And City Attorney Carr can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe at this point that voting on the minutes means that you've read them, acknowledged them, not that you are present and agree with everything in them.
Thank you. Chair Long, a board member should vote on the minutes if they either review, well, if they watched a recording of the meeting. Voting on the minutes would be a yes vote on adopting the minutes would suggest that the board member who's making the vote agrees that the minutes are an accurate reflection of the meeting itself. And so just reading the minutes, I'm not so sure that a board member would be able to determine whether that was an accurate representation of the meeting. And so typically the best practice is to attend the meeting or watch the recording of the meeting on YouTube. And if a board member does either one of those things, then they should vote on the minutes. But if all a board member has done is read the minutes, I wouldn't say that that would be an appropriate way to, they probably should not vote.
Okay.
And if for whatever reason, there happens to be a lack of majority of board members that have, well, if there is no majority of board members that have either attended the meeting or watched a recording of the meeting, and therefore you can't really adopt the minutes or approve the minutes, it can always be pushed to the next meeting, in which case we can approve both sets of minutes. And during that time, I would recommend the board members go back and watch the video. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I attended the meeting and I make a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Your options are aye, nay, or abstain, so that we can keep track of how many. So all in favor of approving the minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
McLaughlin, aye.
Excuse me.
Yep. Do you need a,
Stacy, John, Ellen.
Yes. Oh, and Scott.
Peggy abstains.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to abstain as well.
all right. Any nays? I don't think so. I think that was everybody. Okay. All right. So is that enough for majority? Okay. So minutes are approved. Now we're on to the public comment section. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject that does not later appear on the agenda. 5 minutes per person will be allowed. Do we have any public comment? Okay. Seeing none. Moving on to discussion item 8A, the Urban Renewal Incentive Program amendments. Director Chandler.
Good evening, board members.
1 second here. Let me pull my presentation up onto the screen. Okay, well, thank you for attending this evening. This first item that we're discussing is the Urban Renewal Incentive Programs, some amendments that we are proposing to this new program, actually. Taking a look at this program, it's still in its infancy, really. It was adopted last year in May. It was launched in August. The program replaces 5 previously established programs that the Urban Renewal Agency had. To date, there has been $128,000 funded for 4 different properties, various projects around town or within the area. At this time, there are 2 applications in the queue. One of those is still waiting land use approval, so it'll be sitting there for until that happens. And the other one has been received. It still needs to be reviewed for completeness, and then it will be the request is for up to 150,000. So that will be scheduled for the next available meeting that we can discuss. So, all in all, this has been, it really, the board adopted a great program. And the reason we're in front of you today is, fine tweaking amendments to this program. So, the foundation of it is still a very good program. Reassure everybody on that. It's really just some fine tuning that we're taking a look at. And ultimately, and I think I've discussed this in the past, the city will be looking at a new economic development officer, a new position within the community development department. And this program will be entirely ultimately administered by this person. So we want to make sure that everything's fine tuned and we work out on the kinks on our end before we hand that off to someone. So in the short time the program has been launched, there has been some shortcomings and barriers to funding that I think we've talked about at past meetings, and we wanted to bring those in front of you and address them. The agency at this time, agency staff has been working with outside counsel. Myself, the city attorney, been working with outside counsel to fine tune some of these, fine tune the program for clarity, objectivity, and also legal sufficiency. We initially reached out to outside counsel with some questions regarding lien information and how to establish a lien on a property after funding. And from there branched out as some additional help that we could use their expertise on to refine this program. So in taking, as included in the staff report, there was, laid out a couple, I think 7 or 8 bullet points in there, and they're really thrown on there with no, importance to them. But I think for tonight's presentation, really take a look at the low-hanging fruit first, and then have a deeper conversation as we progress into this presentation. So the first set of amendments are really, it's in regards to administration of the program. These first 2, staff's responsibilities and the lien information. This is information that was requested. As mentioned, the lien information we requested, reached out for counsel on that. And in doing that, there was the recommendation to add some language into the program itself that really lays out the responsibility of agency staff to administer this program. As I mentioned, lien information, the question is asked. It was asked when we were adopted. There was a little bit of back and forth on what the requirements are for this lien information. So we want to make sure that information is very clear and laid out, and a lot of really fine print added to this, to these new amendments. Ultimately, the idea with these is taking what could be looked at as our guidelines, provide, the basic guidelines of the program, but we just want to add some more meat to the actual program guidelines themselves. And then also touching on application material and requirements. Let's touch on what all needs to be submitted with your application. Very important for this application packet. This could include plans, quotes need to be provided, land use approval, historic landmark approval, these types of things which are required for funding. The next step is really a look at some terminology that's used. I've thrown up some language here that there's a good chance may not be, all of these may not be clearly spelled out in the program, but there's language that we found out is used very often. For instance, this like for like, that is, something common that you see on a contract for mechanical work, mechanical replacements. I guess to jump ahead on that one, like for like, maintenance, repairs, as laid out in our requirements, is the maintenance and repairs of properties are not funded by this program. So we just want to add to that a little bit, because there has been some questions on whether or not maybe a new owner coming in fixing a roof, or a new owner coming in and fixing broken mechanical equipment, should they be funded? Well, this is going to lay out how we should treat that. Should a new owner be treated differently than an existing owner if they're really asking for the same types of repairs? And not really. They should really, if it is a maintenance or repair to a building, if you're buying a building that happens to need these repairs, that should be something that is not funded by the program. This definition of mixed use, I think it's one that may feel a little obvious. And I think what everybody thinks about with mixed use development is commercial, is a mix of commercial and residential development. That is the quintessential definition of mixed use. However, to provide additional funding, and really in our downtown, we have many large spaces that need to be rented out. There's large spaces that a small business may not be able to fill the entire area. So you may get a situation where you have one large space and maybe multiple businesses, like a co-op, locate within those larger buildings. So should that large space be considered, if you have a mixture of different types of uses, should that be considered as mixed use? Really, that side aligns with what's spelled out in the Dallas Municipal Code. We actually we allow reduction of parking when you have a mixed use development, but that doesn't mean it's a commercial and residential mixed use. It's basically, we calculated on the most intense use, or the largest use, to the second largest use. So our code, the municipal code, does lean towards this first idea, that really it's just the establishment of having more than one use. Taking a look at really ironing out upgrades. What constitutes an upgrade? Is it a more intense use? Is it, what is the overall system upgrade that is occurring if you're performing an upgrade on a property? And also taking a look at the term reuse, and really just throwing out some of these ideas so we can clearly define it, because this has come up, going back to a new owner compared to an existing owner. Does a new owner moving into a building have more eligibility than an existing owner? So really, this idea here is taking a look at any, some of the common terminology that's used within the report, or within the guidelines, excuse me. And the other large set of amendments that, taking a look at it is in regards to funding. And this is looking at the funding limit that we currently have of $700,000. Disbursement, how we need to clearly define how money can be dispersed. And also, is there any additional funding? How do we discussion on the additional funding that could be available to a project. So for the funding limit, currently, the guidelines read that no project may receive greater than a $700,000 total. Ultimately, the agency is not obligated to fund up to a $700,000. It's really the agency's discretion to fund as much as they would like to fund on a certain project. When you have a funding cap, you do limit your ability to fund these unknown game-changing projects. If there is a large project that comes into the area, by having a $700,000 cap on it, you really restrict how much you can provide to each project coming through. And there was additional discussions on this 700,000, settling on 700,000 because it provides a $50,000 buffer between the Bureau of Labor and Industries has a $750,000 public-private cap that is required by state law. You can't, unless if you go over that 750, it triggers prevailing wage standards. We've seen it is a deterrent to development when you go over 750. So something to keep in mind there, that SDCs, we looked further into it, SDCs are actually not included in this $750,000 cap. So something to keep in mind, no matter how much the agency decides, if this funding cap is removed, you still are restricted by BOLI standards. Adding some language in our guidelines regarding disbursement, we need to clearly define how it's dispersed. There has been questions on when the money is dispersed for a project. Obviously, the total is not provided until the project is complete, but we have in the few projects that we have already approved this year, we have created some language in our agreement that has allowed some of these small businesses to receive 50% of their share ahead of time to maybe put money down on materials, order parts, put money down on a contractor to get themselves on the schedule. We found that was something that was very important to a lot of these smaller businesses, because otherwise they're waiting on, for instance, buying a $15,000 HVAC unit. This could help them put the money down on a system. So we felt the need to add some additional language about the ability to put 50% down payment. And then touching on additional funding, what type of additional funding is available? Currently, the guidelines read that only mixed-use developments with 50+ dwelling units are eligible for additional funding. One thing to keep in mind with that, if we're looking at removing a cap, do we also want to remove the cap for this 50 dwelling unit? There is really, when you break down the numbers, there really wouldn't be a need to, but this is really just something to throw out there. And something to keep in mind, commercial development expansion. This is one thing when digging into this further. Commercial development expansion in the area is limited to $50,000. So no matter how large the project is, if it is a redevelopment project, if it is a project or a development that is already established, they may not be eligible for enterprise zone funding. But then the adverse side of that would be that our program can only provide them $50,000. So would there be any additional consideration for a large scale commercial development in the area? And if the cap is removed, if that is something that we decide on, or if you decide on, should additional information be required for these projects when they come in front of the board to ask for a large sum of money? So, in looking at these large projects, these projects that are funding, let's say $500,000 compared to an individual that's coming in and asking for $75,000. Is that really the same type of application that we want to see in front of us? And that's really just something to think about, whether or not the higher tiers or the more funding should require additional information. And then taking a look at eligibility. This, I think, has been the stumbling block probably for this program. And really, when people open up our application, they take a look at these 2 pages, or this page. It's a list of 10. I'm having it up here just for reference. But this is where I think everyone's eyes go to. Everyone's eyes go to this page and they see, oh, hey, I did this, therefore I am funded for this program. But if you look at the top, what it says is that eligible projects must comprise one or more of the following. So really, you just need to check the box, and then the question is, what type of funding is then available? Are you, if you check the box on one of these, are you then eligible for the whole amount? How we have been doing it is basically an applicant, this lets us know that an applicant is eligible, and then we've been going through and dissecting each line item to make sure, this is eligible, this isn't eligible. And I think that is, for me, that's probably got us into the situation we're at, or there is, as I mentioned in the past, we've denied some applications because we didn't feel that they they didn't increase the tax base. So then an application, so that line item was not eligible. And looking at this, and before I get into my next slide, and then this is the other section from the guidelines that talk about specifically what is ineligible. And both of these, ineligible and eligible statements, they need to be, massaged a little bit because there are some inconsistencies between the two. So with the eligibility and ineligibility of projects, some main points. Should a project be eligible? Should a project need to meet more than one of these listed project goals? Should it possibly be three? Should an applicant need to meet, three of those goals that we talked about to receive this funding? The other, I think, obvious question is, if one of those is listed, does everything that is submitted get funded? And that has been our question of, really figuring out which of the, for instance, if an individual is reactivating a space, which is one of our eligible projects, are we then going to fund a new HVAC unit, carpeting, windows? The list, I think they're kind of separate in the sense that these goals and how they're laid out in the guidelines really read very much like plan goals. They don't read necessarily like specific projects. And the plan would be to add, to create a list of specific eligible, ineligible projects included in the report, included in the guidelines, similar to a list of ineligible projects. So we can clearly say an individual submits, we say, well, no, this doesn't meet, this is in this category. Going through and removing vague, redundant project descriptions. We say, for instance, if you look at eligibility, we say that project that's ineligible is the replacement of building materials. But then you go further up and you talk about quality exterior improvements to a building. So they kind of contradict each other. So it's just going through and making sure that everything lines up, because that can be relatively unclear. Another one that's jumped out to me by creating this list is a fire. I think I've talked about it in the past. Individuals submitted for a fire suppression system within a mill in the area. We found out that it did not increase the taxes. So therefore we said that was ineligible for the program. But if you look further up in our guidelines, it explicitly says the installation of a fire suppression system. So these are the types of things I think that has made it quite difficult on staff's end to administer this program. And I think probably a little frustrating to the very few people that we've had to turn away. But, I think we wanted to create a program that we're giving out, as much money as we can ultimately, and creating a program that is easy to administer. And I think that's where we've hit some bumps in the road. And then adding some additional language regarding, improvements that are required with development and improvements in general, just beefing up the language on infrastructure and utilities, and clearly defining who the eligible applicant or property is. If there are, one example, if an individual has a building that is combined on multiple lots, which we see downtown, is every single lot eligible for the cap, or is the building itself, or is the applicant? So, sounds like we're splitting hairs, I think, but we are, and we need to, so we can administer this and make it just as easy as possible moving forward. And with that, I just want to open up any conversations, questions, comments that everyone has?
I'll go. If Chair Long is okay with that.
Yes.
One comment, one question, Josh. Thanks for this. The comment is, no, the applicant or the property should not be by lot. That would be madness. And question is, I just wanted to confirm, you said the cap does not include SDCs.
The bully cap does not.
Fully cap. So
Yeah.
if we were to include on top of cash, 700 or whatever the number is we're going to use, some easing of SDCs, that would not trigger these sort of onerous state regulations.
Ultimately, yeah. So, for, let's say a development that has 80 units, you could fund all of the 80 units and you'd probably be sitting at $800,000. So you'd be over your cap, but it wouldn't go against any bully determination.
Thank you.
Any other questions, thoughts? Yes. I know you like to think about it before you say anything.
I don't remember. No, I don't recall how many of us were here when all of this was put together, but just a couple of thoughts, I think, as I was reviewing it and trying to think back to the process and what the thoughts were at the time. Doesn't mean that they still work today, but the process. I know that there was a lot of discussion about the cap in trying to ensure that we had a finite amount of money that we wanted to get out to as many people or different entities as possible. And so I think there was some concern that maybe perhaps, and maybe that has never developed, that we might have one or two folks. I think there were some folks that were following kind of the process even before it was rolled out. And so we wanted to make sure, I believe, that if we could help as many people as possible with the limited amount of funds that we have available to us, because it's not an unending amount. And I think the only other thing that came to mind was really, I think in my mind in the process, was the intention was to improve the value of the asset at the end of the day. I don't remember, I think that was kind of that difference between the repairs and maintenance versus, so a roof repair is different and then replacing a whole roof. And I know even in my life, in my daily life, we have to kind of figure out where that lies from an accounting purpose. But I think that was the intention, at least at the time, was to ensure that at the end of the day, the value of the asset was improved, not just replaced, we didn't just take something out and put the same thing back in, but yet we improved the value. We put on a new roof that added life to the building, something along those lines. Those are just the thoughts that came to my mind as far as the discussion from a year and a half ago or whenever this all occurred.
Yeah. Yeah. And for us, I think, I know that the intent is to the return on investment, with the program ultimately. And I think that is what created some issues on my end administering this program. I feel like I was calling the assessor's office once a week to get some input on it. So, finding out to what level are we stopping projects by saying, oh, this doesn't increase the tax, where you can have some facade improvements on the front of a building that may not increase the tax base, may not increase the value of the building at all. But is that something that the agency wants to fund? Because there's really the removal of blight, which is, can be defined differently, by one person to the next. But that really, for us, as far as administering the program, that was the thing. I was kind of cutting a hard line, and I wanted to have the conversation and open up this discussion to see if the agency is if it's more appropriate to maybe spread our wings a little bit and not just strictly look at the return on investment.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's really hard to give you good direction, and you were the recipient of this program. It's handed off to you. You weren't here during the creation. And it's things like, we want to improve the facade downtown because we want downtown to look good, but it doesn't necessarily increase. Maybe the building itself is not currently a blight, but the owner is not going to invest the kind of money it would take to upgrade it. But we as a community do want that for our downtown. So those are all things that we need to consider as a board. I think from the discussion we had before, we were using mixed use. We thought that it meant retail combined with residential because of the housing crisis. We were trying to incentivize that. And we knew that the expenses involved with building was not penciling out, and especially renovating second floor, which is why the fire suppression units were in there, because none of those buildings had that, but would be required for residential. So it was for a purpose other than increasing the tax roll. And so somehow all of these things that we have in our mind of the vision of what we want downtown is turning out to be harder to put down on paper and implement.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit.
Where we're at.
A little bit. I mean, we're close, but I think just some fine tuning on it.
May I riff on something Stacy said, Chair Long?
Yes.
I'm trying to think back. It's been a year, right, since we had this discussion, and correct me if you think I'm off, but I think, as I recall our discussion, we had sort of paradoxical impulses, which was on one hand, essentially wanted to spend the money, make it easier to put dollars out the door, get going. And to remove, as I recall, sort of the various kind of the red tape, the various limits that the previous 4 or 5 programs had. So on one hand, we wanted to make a splash, wanted to make an impact. And at the same time, we also had a considerable amount of discussion about wanting to spread the wealth. So it's kind of both. Is that fair?
I think that's very
We
fair.
wanted it all, actually, Josh. We wanted both. Big splash and spread the wealth. Don't spend it all in one place, but spend it.
And I think too, that's why I think that may be why you're finding it more challenging, is because I think the intention at the time was to give quite a bit of leeway to what might fit. So that you could find a way to make something fit, as opposed to if you do this, you get this. And if you do this, you get this. But it was much more of a broader general look. This is kind of the look and feel of what we're looking for. And you'll know it when you see it, which makes it a lot harder on you. I apologize.
Right. I'll go for it. Yeah.
We're still in the final stages of putting together something to bring back to you all at the next meeting. And we're in the weeds, which is a good place to be when you're trying to sort out some of this. And I did play a large role in crafting this entire program with the former agency's manager and an outside consultant who sort of specializes in these types of programs. And I think that this conversation that we're having on this matter right now is exactly right. With all that said, one of the ways that I've been thinking about a method to incorporate giving the board the flexibility it seems to want, while also allowing it to be accessible to the public primarily, and also, in fairness, giving staff some confidence when it comes down to evaluating these applications, is to have a really robust black and white list. These are the projects that we're interested in funding. And then at the very end of that black and white list, and that list might be a page, might be 2 pages, but at the very end, it will say something like, and any other project that the board approves, right? So long as it's consistent with ORS chapter 457, which is the urban renewal statute, which basically just gives this board authority to spend its money on the things that Josh has mentioned. The removal of blight is just one of those factors. And so there should always be a mechanism to be able to fund a project that somebody can come and present to this board. And Josh and I internally have been calling it like Shark Tank. You know, they come and give a pitch, see if you guys are going to bite. That's always going to be an opportunity. There's always going to be an available opportunity for that. But you know, the fact of the matter is 99% of these applications should fit somewhere in this black and white list. And so that's really the hard part. And that's where we're at now. And as Josh summarized some of the changes that we're looking at, I just wanted you all to know that that's something that's absolutely at the forefront of where I'm at in thinking about this, as well as giving this board a sort of a catch-all opportunity to say no, because sometimes you might want to, for whatever reason, even if a project otherwise meets these eligibility criteria, there's an assumption or a presumption rather that they will be awarded the funds. But still, despite that, I still think that this board might want, you know, because you can't think about everything. There's going to be situations that pop up that you might just say, no, we don't want to fund that project, even though it meets the criteria. And so unless anybody has any strong feelings on that, I'll also be including that in the proposed update that I think will be coming next month. Fingers crossed. So thanks.
And we do need to move forward on it because we do have a project in the pipeline. And so I think one of the things, maybe this is what you're about to say, but one of the things we really do need to talk about is the cap of 700,000. You know, as I've talked with Josh about projects that are in the pipeline and what that would mean for those projects, I think it has the unintended consequence of making some of those projects not be possible, I guess is what I want to say there. So we originally sort of picked that number, as Dr. Chandler said, because it helped us avoid the bully cap. But then we talked about the fact that, is it really up to this board to say we don't want to go over the bully? If the project does want to go over that, it shouldn't matter to us, right? If they're going to fund the rest of it somehow. So that's a thought. And we do have some big projects. We know the costs of everything have gone up since we started working on this, building materials in particular. Housing is a huge crisis. We've got the emergency declaration now. There's additional funding from the state that could now be put together with our funding to make projects happen, which just was not something that we knew about or conceived of at the time that we put these guidelines in place.
One thought, Chair Long and Josh and Jonathan, might be to define game changing project. And not to give you another definition to come up with or another checklist, but if there's something that specifically would trigger that or be readily defined, then maybe gives us option. Like, you know, most projects will fall under this cap, but if it's a game changer.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to what Attorney Carr was saying, that these projects are meant to come before us. The previous director really wanted the small ones to be able to be something that we'd given enough direction that they could approve and move people on, so they could move through things and not having every single small thing come before the board. But it was never designed that we would write these in such a way that they would never have to come before us. And if they met them, they were automatically funded. Like, urban renewal is subjective in a way, is what projects do we want to prioritize and how do we want to do it? But at the same time, you can't make things too subjective, because then you're opening yourself up to, legal problems. So.
Yeah, and one thought on the game changer, and it might already be in there in the sense that additional funding, there's a line that says additional funding may be provided to mixed use developments that provide 50 or more. I would say 50 or more dwelling units.
So you already have your definition essentially.
In a way, I mean, I'm just thinking about that now. I would think that a downtown mixed use development of 50 units would be huge. So, I mean, if that's something, then removing the cap to give an opportunity of whatever kind of funding the agency can provide for something that's providing 50 plus dwelling units would be a huge benefit to the community. So that might be something that's already in there and defined. And like I said, the other step would just be removing that actual 700,000 cap. It's a $700,000 cap as Chair Long was mentioning. It really, I mean, it at some point it does tie the agency's hands. You can't go past that 700,000, but there's the opportunity to provide that and leave the determination up to BOLI on how much can actually be provided.
And someone could bring a big project to us and we could say, no, we don't want to fund all of it either,
Mhm.
but we'd be willing to fund X portion.
Yeah, so there's that aspect of this idea of removing the cap, and thank you for bringing us back on track there, in the sense that I do have a couple questions or points that I wanted to get clarification from the board on before we leave tonight, just to make sure that they are included in those modifications. And that one of them would be asking for a consensus on removing that funding cap. That would be the big question for you.
Well, I'll just toss out there, after my conversations with Director Chandler and also City Manager Klebs, I think it makes sense.
I think that I may need to recuse myself from this specific advice, just due to my association with one of these large scale projects. I think there's a conflict of interest. I would like to defer to council. Does that sound right? Yes. So I'm going to
Thank you.
recuse myself from that.
I just comment 700,000 a year ago is at least 10% less, 15% less than it was. So 770 would be the same number today, or 800. It does seem like a big number already, but it went down 10 to 15% just in the last year from construction costs.
Yeah.
Excuse me, could you speak into?
Oh. Yeah, do you want me to repeat, or do you? Okay, I will from now on.
Remind me, Jonathan, or Joshua, rather, if you would, ballpark, what's the total SDCs on a dwelling unit nowadays? A round number?
Yeah, it varies. We're using 10,000. This program does 10,000, and I think 10,000 is probably a pretty good estimate. If the parks continue to increase their fees, it will kind of cut into that. There has been a steady increase of the parks SDCs that has been occurring the past 3 years now. So other than that, multifamily dwellings, multifamily development, it's not such a cut and dry number like it is for single family, because it's really based on the pipe size that's used and sewer line sizes. So I think 10,000 is still probably a pretty good estimate for a
So if we used
SDC.
you said it's a little fuzzy with multi-unit developments, but if we had a ballpark number in mind, a conservative number like 6,000 or 7,000, and you've thought about a 50 unit project, would the numbers at work, would that be enough to keep the cash cap matched with a reduction or a payment of the SDCs? So in other words, would like $1 million or a 1.2 million for that kind of project be, in your opinion, sufficient incentive to cover some of the larger projects you see on the horizon?
$1 million funding an SDC project just for SDCs.
$1 million between SDCs and the cash incentive. I say cash, the payment.
I guess that's difficult without looking at the numbers further.
So I guess what I'm getting at is, do you have a revised number for this cap, or are you thinking like no cap?
No cap, and just keeping it open. And ultimately it's the agency's discretion. So you don't have to even get close to a cap if you decide not to. So, I mean, it's really just kind of an arbitrary number if you look at it that way. You know, it's the thing, and you know, Jonathan touched on it, is you know, it's not this, it's, we want to be very clear that this isn't a program that just because you apply, you get all the money, you know, because you submit an application for $700,000 does not mean you're getting $700,000. So, you know, having that discretion, I think, really makes it so a cap isn't really needed ultimately.
I guess what I would like, just personally, as one of how many number of people, is if not a cap, then some sort of maximum guideline, whether it's a percentage or some other consideration, so that if we're talking about a large project, we have some idea of what might be an acceptable kind of amount to discuss, as opposed to starting from scratch, assuming we have more than one really, really large project coming down the pipe.
I think every time a project comes before the board, though, we discuss it. And part of in the last year that you've been on the board, we haven't really had that as like what happened in the first, 4 years that I was on the board, where we were considering individual projects. So I think somehow we kind of have gotten on this mindset that like we're trying to put everything down so that it can be like approved or not, but that's not really the concept. I mean, I think that started because Director Cannon wanted to be able to approve those smaller projects without coming to the board, but she also wanted enough guidelines that she wasn't approving things that the board disapproved after she'd approved it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely understood. I
know-
guess I'm still looking for some kind of coherent or logical process to approaching large projects, even if there's no cap.
The approach is that they come and pitch to us like Shark Tank, and we decide if they're amazing enough and we believe that they can do it or not. Because you can have the same project presented by two different developers, and one you have full confidence that they're going to pull it off and it's worth your investment, and another one that you're just not really sure that you might be throwing that money out the window.
Is part of the process they present their full budget, so you would know a percentage of what this money is compared to their full budget, or are they at a full budget stage when they present to us?
Well, when it's a standalone, if it's outside of this program, if it's a, let's say we don't have a program and an individual is looking for funding, they would come in front of the board, and I would assume they would provide their financials. They would provide all that information to really sell you on it. Right now, with the way this incentive program is based, it's up to them to provide that information. It's, both ways are, but they would. It's not entirely specific on what needs to be provided. And that is something that, to throw out there, if you remove the cap on this program, is there a set amount of money? If a project goes over a certain amount of money, do you want additional information to be provided? Financial information to be provided, or however.
So I'm going to turn back to the attorney at this point. Also, isn't a lot of this handled in the disposition, the DDA? Because in the past, when we've given money, we've tied it to certain things that we expected of them. And if they didn't do that, they didn't get the money.
So, so many great questions here tonight. The agency would still be using DDAs, but only when we already own the property. So for example, the Tony's building property, the agency has the deed for it. And so we're the owner. And so if anybody wants to apply for this grant program on the Tony's building, that would be strange because it's ours. We could do whatever we want with that building. But if the agency wants to enter into an agreement with a developer to take that site and turn it into something else consistent with the agency's plan, then we would enter into a DDA. And that would really spell out the developer's responsibilities and the agency's responsibilities to transfer title once the developer meets those. In the case of any other development, that would be hoping to get some sort of agency support, that they owned the deed, they owned the parcel, they have the deed, and it's not the agency's property, there wouldn't be a DDA. And so the mechanism that the agency uses to provide the support through this grant program is a grant agreement. And in that grant agreement, it's effectively the terms and conditions of them accepting this money. And part of that involves, as Josh mentioned earlier, a lien on the property that would sort of, it acts as a security interest to ensure that the agency's interests are secured. But there's no DDA. And in fact, we've already had to tell somebody who's thinking about going through this program to make improvements to an agency property that, well, it's the agency's property. So we're not going to fund that. We can do it through DDA, but not through that. So with all that said, and still tying it back into this issue on funding limits, I'm looking at the guidelines. It's on page 14 of 43 in the packet, and it's the third paragraph. It says incentive program funds may be combined with other public programs, provided, however, no project may receive greater than $700,000 total in funding or abatements from both the City of the Dalles and the agency. And again, that 700,000 number, it appears really arbitrary until you think about BOLI and its $750,000 trigger. And that's really the only reason that number is in this packet. And so we determined that SDCs and SDC waivers and SDC payments from agencies to private developments are not considered by BOLI and when they make that determination. And so once that was resolved, which happened a few months ago after these were adopted, it just seemed a little unusual to have a funding limit. Typically, the funding limit will be the strength of the idea. If it's not a good and well-supported idea, this board should vet it, and so will Josh and so will I. We may even call Matthew, who knows, but we'll have some eyes on it. But as far as, some of the questions that we were hoping to get direction on, if there is no strong objection to removing the funding limit, which is effectively acting as a handcuff for both, well, it's a handcuff to the agency. And it really has no purpose in law. I couldn't recommend removing it strongly enough. Because it just only gives us more flexibility. But as Josh sort of asked just a second ago, if the agency was interested in having some additional scrutiny on larger projects, whatever that means, what threshold do you think you all might be looking at here as far as what constitutes a larger project? And we know we have that definition of game changer, but let's just use some easy numbers for the sake of this conversation, right? So if somebody comes in with an ask of $500,000, that seems like a pretty big project to me. And so maybe they should have to go through some extra hoops, but they would be doing that here at this meeting, probably sitting in those chairs over there to my right. And so we'd like to be able to inform them on some things that the board might want to see. And I can think about what those should be and include them in these guidelines for you all to review at the next meeting. I'm hard pressed to think off the top of my head what else we would want to see. It would typically be looking at almost like a diligence on behalf of the agency to ensure, because ultimately this is all public money, and so we'd like to give it to somebody who we know is not going to take it and go to Costa Rica or whatever, right? And that's we have part of that through the grant agreement program, but we also want to make sure that the money is spent in an efficient way that sort of guarantees its success. It's a limited resource and it's a public resource. So that might include something as simple as the developer providing us with their financials or their financial forecasts. Although I don't know how to read a financial forecast, I'm sure we'll find somebody who could if we had to. And so these are some of the ideas that we're thinking about And anybody who has any thoughts on this, please give me a call or talk to Josh. And I promise you, we'll think about it very seriously. I don't have any strong answers, is the very long way of saying that. But I am considering a lot of these options, and I'm optimistic that we'll come up with something strong here to ensure that this funding is protected and the agency's interests are secured, and also that the money is, making a big splash and being spread as much as we can throughout the district. Yeah, sorry.
So parameters without handcuffs. And because none of us here, as far as I know, are builders or even know what might come before us.
Yeah,
I don't know what I don't know yet.
right. And we won't know until somebody submits something. There are no projects that are there are no current applications that even come close to any of these numbers. And just like I mentioned earlier in this meeting, 99% of these will be ideally, after the new updated guidelines get adopted and the applications finalized, 99% of them should be handled administratively by staff, and they should meet these black and white criteria that are on the four corners of a piece of paper. But every once in a while, you're going to get something that, we can't think of everything. And so that's okay. We'll just include something that says we reserve the right not to think of everything, and we'll think about it when it comes up. We could do something like that too for these extra criteria for review. The board will expect anything that you deem relevant. And my job will be to do some research into what best practices suggest you all should be considering as most relevant. I don't know yet, but I'll find out.
Do any board members have strong objections, or any objection for that matter, to removing this $700,000 cap?
How much money is in the incentive fund, roughly? Or available for incentive funding?
For this year, we've budgeted off the top of my head,
Just round numbers.
2.2,
Yeah.
2.2 million for this budget year. And then next budget year, you'll have to wait and see 2 weeks from now. No, I think 2.7 for this next year. So throwing out numbers into, budgeting for the what ifs for these large projects to come through. We've had discussions with larger projects in the area, but as development goes, there's always delays here and there. So it's just wishful thinking when we budget. But yeah, 2.2 at this time and 2.7 next year.
And the other thing too is, and I know it was a previous board, which is only half of this board, but what we had talked about was we had to put a number into the budget. But if we had a really great, I guess, game-changing project that was more than that we were fine making a budget. It's not an amendment. What's the correct legal term when you move more than 10%? Anyway, that we would be willing to spend more than we had budgeted by moving it out of the category in. We were just trying to have a number to start with. But our idea was that we're not trying to spread the money out over the life of the agency. If we get some awesome project, we want to just fund it while we have it. And then if other things are coming in, we'll use the money until it's gone, because that's the point.
Mhm.
It's the money.
Mhm.
Good question. Anybody else? Nope. Okay, so there's your direction. And what was the other thing you needed a direction on?
The other was just a question on this mixed use. Do we go with the typical commercial residential type, or kind of open up?
I think that was my thought at that time. It doesn't mean I couldn't be convinced otherwise, but I think at the time, I think that's what we were searching for, was trying to find a way to use some of those upper levels and provide more housing for people downtown.
Yeah, and in doing that, ultimately it's that, meets a couple points of our goals, the plan goals. But yeah, like I said, I know the Dallas Municipal Code does call out a different way to look at mixed use, and that's why I wanted it to be a discussion.
Maybe we need
for
to
y'all.
specify.
Mhm.
And there's
Yep.
still an opportunity to come before us for funding for another of putting multiple types of businesses in or something that they need to do to make that happen. Because, right? we leave them
Yeah,
that flexibility. It's
outside
just-
of the program.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think the program was just trying to emphasize that and get people thinking about that, narrow the scope. Does anyone have an objection about specifying? Okay.
Objection.
I think so.
The other is really, and we can take a closer look, before we present it to you, but it's this talking about the eligible projects. It's that list of eligible projects. It talks about just one of those needs to be met, and then ultimately the project is able to be funded to whatever amount. So our hope was to just refine that, add to it a little bit, take out some vague language, some redundancies in there, and add specific projects so people have an idea of what is being funded and what isn't being funded. So I guess I don't need much direction on that one. I just talked myself through it. So and then, yeah, I mean, at this time, anything else that the board would like to see, anything that comes to mind between now and next month or in the next couple of weeks when we start fine tuning everything even further. Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, fingers crossed. Our hope is to have this in front of you next go around here. So it'd be the April 12th meeting, somewhere around there. No, that's our budget. So like April 18th. So on to the next item here. The next item is, while we reached out for outside counsel, some suggestions came up about, taking a look at our plan, taking a look at our urban renewal plan. Urban renewal plan was adopted in 1990 when the program was adopted. It includes 14 goals and objectives, which, provide the guidance for this program that we have. In that period of time, the plan has been amended 16 different times for various different reasons. Some of them have been fairly small amendments. Others have been larger amendments, expanding the boundary. That's happened expanding or decreasing the boundary. That's happened 3 different times. And also increasing the overall maximum indebtedness. That happened in 2009. So over the next few months, staff will be, conducting a review of the current plan, making sure it is up to date, making sure that everything really going through it, just, something needs to happen every once in a while, making sure that we are working with an up-to-date plan. And then some of the things that have been laid out in this staff memo here is, talking about the updates to, statistical and financial information, going through there and make sure everything's consistent with what we have today. I know in looking back at the plan that's currently available, there are some very old numbers in there. So just a matter of bringing those, getting them up to date, going through our projects and activities list. So I think there's the projects that were laid out many years ago, and many of them actually have been completed or are entirely finished, but they're still called out in the plan as if they are planned to happen. For instance, the roundabout. There's this idea that there might be a roundabout by Sunshine Mill. So, providing an update to just show that, show the past successes of the board and how that it's not just a list that we're not looking at anymore, but it's actually these things have been completed. So some updates there. Just overall reevaluating the goals of the plan. There's language in there about the need for a citizen advisory committee. I think you could say that having 2 members of the public currently on this board, that might defeat the purpose.
So
But-
that was actually when Council McLaughlin can speak more to this, but at one point, the city council was the urban renewal agency, and there was a citizen advisory board that met and then made recommendations. But that is
Okay.
not the form that we have anymore. We actually, city council voted and changed the format.
Okay, yeah. Seeing those are, some things that would be, just a quick update.
There was at one time a proposal for 5 roundabouts within, that I remember. There was also a proposal for a build out on Washington Street. And that was a major development. That was a part of the Port, First Street development. These are all proposed projects. Some have been abandoned. Some are continuating or in continuation. So I think if you're asking us about updates and renewals, having the plan in front of us would help. And then having a list of things that we have accomplished, like you're saying. I remember seeing a list at one time. I don't know if that was with Director Cannon or previous. See, I've had 1, 2, 3, 4 planners, directors since my tenure, and a lot of changes. But we should probably come back and take a look at where are we, and where are we going, and how are we going to get there, and then answer those questions, and then have that would be the need for an update on the current plan that's in place.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it, touches on that. It's, making sure that what we have is really just up to date and just an overall, the overview of everything. There's some basic formatting, and we have attached as Exhibit B in your packet. We've already started formatting. I think it looks a lot better than what it was. So, big thank you to Paula on that one for the help putting this thing together, a little more legible for all of us to review. And then, so staff is really just hoping, just wanted to bring that to your attention, that we'll be taking a stab at this over the next couple of months, and, looking for an adoption this summer. If for, the 17th Amendment, even if it's just, minor clerical changes here and there. Other than that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
Is that allowed?
Yes.
URA board meeting 3/15/22. Somebody brought up the idea of reviewing and looking back at our projects list and adding 1 or 2, freshening it. And one of those would be the idea of a Federal Street Plaza. We'll get back to it. And the exact quote is, "We won't let it fall off the list."
Okay.
Let's not let it fall off the list. Let's put it on the list in red letters and at least be able to consider it going forward.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it was, unfortunately, some of them past amendments that happened, we made the amendments and the language that was amended didn't make it onto the plan itself. So there's
Yeah, it was
those
very
types of updates.
confusing.
Yeah, updates that need to occur. Currently, what we have online is rather out of date as well. So that's a great one. The other one, the reason I think we got off onto this whole thing is, as I was mentioning, our consultant that we're working with on these amendments recommended, of course, the obvious one of putting the incentive program in on your list of projects. So yeah, it's really just an overall update. And hopefully in the next couple of months, we'll be, sharing a revised version for you. I think that is it for me on those 2 topics.
Great. So we're on to staff comments and project updates, the Tony's building.
Yeah, the Tony's building. I think we've talked about it quite a while. I just wanted to provide everybody an update on this. After months and months of waiting for funding with Business Oregon and the EPA, we found out about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, that the Tony's building is not eligible for funding. So this was a shock, a huge letdown for all of us that have been working so closely with this project. The board directed staff to take a closer look at demolishing the building February 2021. We looked into some additional funding. It really came out that the board didn't want any delays, and they wanted to just go forward with the money that we already had to tear the building down and do the abatement. We were maybe coerced into following funding through Business Oregon up to At times they were mentioning funding up to 750,000 to cover the whole project. And then it dwindled a little bit. And then the most recent offer ultimately was a $500,000 loan and a $250,000 grant. Ultimately we were, interested. And then it was like carpet being pulled out from underneath us. And about 2 weeks after that, we found out that there was a minor detail that that made it so we were ineligible. And that was the fact that the agency purchased the Tony's building in 2016 without conducting a phase 1 environmental survey. This information was brought to Business Oregon's attention 18 months ago, but they still pushed us through the process. There was times where we were very hesitant on our end. We wanted to get this RFP out. We were hesitant to put the RFP out until we knew about this funding. We were even told by Business Oregon that we could start charging, start billing, and we would be recouped as soon as the grant funding went through, to then only find out we were ineligible. So that was quite a bummer. Thankfully, there's nothing that we did on our end that made it, well, as far as putting the application packet together, everything that we had was top notch. I think the team we worked on to get everything together to get the funding was top notch. We stayed up on it the best we could, and there was some miscommunication, dwindling communication, you could say, on the Business Oregon end of things until the final letdown of that. However, there is $60,000 available that we have revised an application and will be submitting by the end of the month to try to get 60,000, but that's not 60,000 that we're going to wait on anything for. That's 60,000 that could be put towards possibly the end of the project, maybe some funding that we incur. And then the other update to it is that we will be putting out the RFP for the demo and the abatement by the end of this month as well. I think on our end, we waited long enough. We've had an RFP sitting for 9 months, waiting to go, waiting for this money to come through. So I think for us, we just want to see this project moving forward. So I think there's some good and bad in that update for you, but I can answer any questions that you may have on that one before I go to the next. All right. Brief update, First Street parking lots. This is something, I came on as the director, and I will also be overseeing the city's facilities department as soon as we hire on a facilities maintenance supervisor. And having a background in construction and seeing projects and know what it takes to put into it. I think that the First Street parking lots to me just seem a little run down, and I have reached out to a local fencing company. So we're actually getting some new fencing put up there. It's a very small cost. So hopefully that new fencing will be going up before Cherry Festival. I'm hearing that might go up next week. This is the fencing that's actually the First Street, essentially the Chinatown block, effectively, that is Washington to Court. We have some broken posts out there, broken railing. It's really just, it looks a little tattered out there. We do know that the First Street project will be happening. The new streetscape will be happening, but that's not for another 2 years, and it'll just be further deterioration. So I looked at it as it's a rather small cost at this time to just kind of clean it up a little bit out there. I know the other focus after that is just, taking a look at the lot that we have, the lots that we have down there. If we can't clean them up, maybe possibly fill some potholes, restripe, get those parking lots back to a usable condition rather than how they are now. We have heard many concerns throughout the community. There's a fear that some people have, some local business owners, some employees around town that park in that parking lot and have had some uncomfortable experiences. We have installed security lighting out there, but I think that's the first step in just cleaning it up. And I mean, we see it from the freeway. So I think for such a small cost that it'll take to upgrade these lots, I think it's be well worth it. And we've seen enough delays with the First Street project. I don't want to be the next person to just say, well, we're just going to wait till First Street comes in before we fix this up, because Hopefully it's 2 years until we begin construction, but construction's then going to take its period of time. So
When you have such large volume of people on First Street during Cherry Festival and those railings are in the condition, it's a safety issue.
yep.
And it's also a perception.
Yeah.
So you're right. We need to fix those up.
Fingers crossed it'll happen before Cherry Festival. That's what I was told. So, I'm hoping to get a crew out there early next week to start in
Put
on
you
that.
on that, please.
Well, thank you for having that vision
Yep.
and pushing it forward.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. And then the last update is just really quick. It's about our upcoming budget meeting, and that will be April 11th. If you haven't received any information on that, please let me know and we'll get that information to you. Other than that, that's it for me.
We have a time for that meeting, Joshua?
I'm assuming it's 5:30, but yeah. So yeah, April 11th, 5:30, and then there will be then a follow-up. We'll have back-to-back meetings. We'll go from budget meeting the week after that. Then we'll have our regularly scheduled meeting here.
Right. Board member comments or questions?
I do. I have series. The building located at Second and Monroe Street is an eyesore and really needs to be addressed. Where are we in the process of resolving this longstanding problem? Next to Domino's Pizza.
Yeah, the Soda Works.
Sodaworks, yeah.
Yeah, this building was approved, the incentive program, and my apologies, I should have updated you all on that one. I was told to do that last time. We have funded the project for demolition. So we signed off on the agreement for that. I think we sent off Monday. So hopefully we'll start seeing some movement.
That pleases me because that's been a project that I've looked at for many years. Question number 2. Do we have any updates on the Mill Creek Walkway project? Where do we stand on that?
Well, it being we have, what I can say the agency's done is we've budgeted once again for that in our next budget. I don't think that money I don't think it will occur next year, but it's a long-standing item that we'll continue to put in the budget year after year until it happens. I thought, and I don't want to quote Scott over at the Parks Department, I thought he said possibly 10 years away.
That's what he told me.
Yeah. And another ODOT project, not to say they're all delays, but that one definitely has
When you have railroad and ODOT involved, that's what we're going to get. All right. The old Chronicle building, which is where are we standing on the development? It was reported that it was a store, like a grocery store or something. How is that progressing?
Yeah, so that application, that is one of the incentive program applications that's in the queue. So that's waiting land use approval. I would have to check with the planner on that, but I believe that we've noticed the neighborhood. So we have started the land use review process for a site plan review for grocery store / multiple uses are in there. Yeah.
One more here, the Hanlon, which is the old Griffith Motors. Where are we on that project? I know that has been sold and that transaction has transpired.
Yeah, it's the developer. I think at this time working through financials, working through I think getting everything together for their submission for land use review. We have discussed it at a pre-application meeting, so we do know the requirements of it. But I think at this time it's on their team to fine tune everything before they submit.
Excellent. And this is not a question, but it's I, along with the mayor yesterday, visited the annex or the Oregon Motor Hotel, and good progress is being made. The roof has been completed. They are now restructuring the apartment complex and some of the rooms on the west side. The west side is in pretty good shape. The east side has some development to clean up some of those rooms, but that's moving ahead quite nicely. And so I hope some of the anxiety from businesses is that the plan is in place and the number of supervision personnel, the plan of appropriate use of that area, I think it will help lower some of the concerns. I'm hopeful. So that's my report on that.
Anyone else? Questions, comments?
I don't know the appropriate venue or person to do this, but I'd really like to see some creative thinking on the Mill Creek project or Mill Creek Greenway or Mill Creek Trail project. The idea that it's going to be 10 years is
I don't even know if I'll be alive in 10 years, so
well,
I'd like to see it before.
it's true for anyone, right? It's ludicrous. I don't think it's too strong a word to say that it's going to be a decade before the state could possibly get around to releasing or using or applying some funds. I have a hard time staying calm. That just really rubs me the wrong way. And in light of other projects, First Street, Tony's, perhaps some further conversation with our parks partners and ourselves, and laying out some options might be advisable. It's going to be like a $50 million project by the time ODOT gets onto it, and it's just a trail. Let's move along with it. That's my comment. Thank you.
Anybody else?
We do have kind of related development with Parks Department. We have approved the go-ahead on a mountain bike skills development trail area down near Mill Creek behind Safeway to try to alleviate some of the camping and those sort of conditions there, make the parks a little bit safer in that area. It's what we can, it's one step. It's what we've been able to make room for in the budget, and it will be completed this spring.
That's great to know. Thank you. Okay, so the other thing I will just put out there to everyone is we are down one community member. When Lindsay Gamay resigned from the board, and the mayor and I have created a list and we've talked to everybody, and so far I don't have anyone. So if you have a suggestion, if you could please provide it to myself, and then I'll work with the mayor and Director Chandler. We'd like to get that filled as well. And that will be it, and I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Did you happen to play soccer?
I did.
Ellen, you were just a little girl. You didn't ever say anything. And when I came up to talk to you and give you instruction, you just, I'm sorry. Yes, I was. I was your coach with your mother.
Yeah.
He has stories for all
I
of
was
us.
trying to place you. That's,
Remember
His wife's my kindergartner.
So familiar.
yeah, I was your coach.
Oh, I mean, yep.
And I know your daddy.
Hopefully I'll
Yep.
be coaching in the next couple of years. My
Makes
daughter's
us
almost
awesome.
2,
Oh,
so getting her in early.
wait until, well, that was James. James was with you.
Yeah.
I'm actually really excited with everybody that's come on to the.
That's what I was trying to